former district president, a couple district presidents ago, in fact, when I was still back in Millersburg and Deep River, the DP called me up once and said, "Yeah, I just got a nasty phone call from one of your members." And this was somebody who was a grandmother, had a grandson, granddaughter who were living together, weren't married, just had a kid out of wedlock, and wanted to bring it to the church and have it baptized. Well, they weren't members of the church. They had no intention of ever coming back to the church. They didn't want their living situation addressed. They just wanted their kid to be baptized because, well, just in case that's what you do. No sense of raising the child in the faith or anything like that. So I said, no, that's not what baptism is about. You know, if you want to raise the child in the faith, and you want to address, your own living situation, I'd be happy to baptize your baby and bring you into the church. But if this is just, we're going to do it just in case, even though nothing in our life is going to be Christian, no, we don't play that game. So she called the district president up irate that I had refused this baptism. And fortunately for me, the district president's answer to her was, sounds to me like he did his job. She hung up just as upset with him as she was with me. But DPs get phone calls about pastors all the time. With a case like this, where it's obvious that this isn't just an issue between a member, but an issue that is now spreading throughout a congregation and has the potential for tearing a congregation apart, the DP has to go and talk to people. So that's what he'll do. He'll go, he'll make an appointment to sit down with, especially to begin with, as an initial meeting, the leadership of the congregation and the pastor. Both parties, not one party against the other. Both parties face to face. And instead of talking about each other, actually get both parties to start talking to each other. Have the members actually bring their charges forward and put them right in front of the pastor. And have the pastor actually answer them in front of the district president. Now understand, a district president does not have any authority to remove any pastor in this district from his congregation. They don't have that authority. The only authority that can remove a pastor from a congregation is the congregation. That's it. All a district president can do, there are two levels of discipline. He can restrict a pastor, which means he can keep a pastor from getting called anywhere else so that his name won't go on other call lists. Or he can suspend a pastor from synodical membership. But that doesn't necessarily remove a pastor from a congregation. All it means is that pastor is no longer a member of synod. And if the congregation wants to stay as a member of synod, then they can't have a pastor who's not a member of synod. But ultimately, removing a pastor from his office can only be done by the congregation, and then only for very strict reasons. We have in Timothy and Titus the qualifications for the office of the ministry. And the reasons for removing a pastor are either an openly teaching false doctrine, that he's teaching wrong, and doesn't just say something wrong once in a while, or on the spur of the moment in public speaking, sometimes things don't come out right. And I've also seen people try and remove a pastor because of that situation, because while he was speaking extemporaneously off the cuff, he said something that was wrong. We all do. That's not teaching false doctrine. That's stumbling. We're talking persistently teaching something that's biblically wrong. That's a reason for removing a pastor. An openly outward sinful life, where he is doing something patently sinful, that's a cause for removing a pastor. And just plain malfeasance of duty, he won't do his job. He's lazy or whatever else, won't do his job. That's a reason for removing a guy from office. That's it. Only those three reasons: false doctrine, sinful life, malfeasance of duty. Otherwise, issues have to be worked through. Now, next question. How had the chairman erred? All right, he did try talking to the pastor, he says. Anybody see anything else in there that smacks of not being quite the way it ought to be? How about the letters? What do you think of the letters? Guy says, I got a stack of letters from people written about the pastor. One, why are people suddenly sending him letters about the pastor? Why is he gathering letters? When letters come, some of which are signed, some of which are not signed, by the way. If I ever get a letter not signed, it goes in the trash can without even being read. If you're not going to follow the 8th commandment and confront something personally and put yourself on the line, I don't even want to hear it. But gathering letters like that, each and every one of those letters, each person that had a complaint should have been asked personally, did you go and talk to him? Did you talk to him? And if the answer to that is no, that letter should go in the trash. That's also it. Why him? Why is everybody writing him letters? It's like he's now known publicly as the guy you go to if you've got a gripe against the pastor. Why not going directly to the pastor? In this particular situation, I was asked to go along with the district president to talk to this congregation. And I saw this stack of letters, and I read the letters. Some of them were signed, some weren't. The ones, well, all of them, in fact. I asked this chairman, have these people talked to the pastor about this? No? All right, so nobody's talked to him about any of the concerns here. They're just all of a sudden nailing him with a letter in public. Yeah? Okay, that's a problem. These people need to be asked, you go and talk to them. And if you exhaust your possibilities of talking with them, then you come and you talk to me. We don't do things by writing accusatory letters about one another. That is not a biblical way to proceed. And this has happened to me more than once. In fact, I've had a situation where one of the officers of the church said, I got a stack of letters about the pastor from his former congregation. The guy wanted to oust the pastor, so he actually contacted his former congregation, found who the malcontents were, and solicited letters from them about a pastor. Not even a situation in that parish, but trying to nail him for people being unhappy in the last parish. I've got a book in my office called Clergy Killers. There are those out there, for whatever reason, have authority issues with pastors and try to destroy them. And it's amazing how many stories there are in this book about people from former congregations following a pastor to a new congregation and trying to rile people up in the new congregation about him before he even starts. In fact, there's a story in there about as a guy was being installed in his new congregation, he had former members from his last one at the installation service telling people all the horrible things he had done in the last congregation. There are weird psychological things that go on in some people's heads that are not Christian at all, that a congregation needs to be wary of. Anybody who says they're soliciting letters or they have a stack of letters is immediate red flag. Why are you gathering letters? The role of elders and the role of chairman is not to be the go-to guy to complain to about the pastor. If you've got a problem with the pastor, you actually have to talk to him. Now, it sounds simple enough, I recognize that can be an intimidating thing. I recognize there's a layman would be nervous about it because the pastor does hopefully know more doctrine and scripture, and they could embarrass you or humiliate you. I get those feelings. But, hopefully everybody knows I'll talk to them like a human being and not try and embarrass anybody. But that's not an excuse to skip Matthew 18. Did the pastor do anything wrong by saying that they had to talk to him personally? Well, no and yes. No, it's not wrong to insist that if somebody's got a gripe, they actually got to talk to you. That's biblical. Everybody in the congregation has to abide by that. But there are other things a pastor can do other than just kind of defray the confrontation and say, they got to talk to me or this is a dead issue. A pastor should, who cares about his sheep, say, look, if there's problems there with this guy, I'll go talk to them. And in fact, this elder that they contacted or the chairman they contacted, since they've contacted you, you're going to come along with me. And let's sit down, let's see if we can work through this. Now, that's what the guy should have done. And he didn't. He just simply, they're just complainers, I don't want to hear about them, and used this first step of Matthew 18 as an excuse not to deal with it when he should have dealt with it. So if I hear somebody's got a complaint about me, I want to talk to them. Even if they've gone about getting me that complaint in the wrong way, I still want to talk to them. And I'll call them up or whatever, and I'll ask, let's sit down and talk about this. Sometimes I'm told, I don't want to talk to you. Well, then I might send an elder or something. But somebody's got to talk to them and work through this. You can't just leave a complaint fester or it gets worse. How does the process change if the accusation involves something illegal? What if the pastor was accused, this may not necessarily be illegal, it's immoral, of adultery? What if he's accused of homosexuality, which happens usually about one pastor a year in this district? The last few years this has been the case. One pastor a year will be accused of either having an affair with somebody in the congregation or something sexually illegal, homosexuality, solicitation of a prostitute, or even incest. We've had a case of that in the district with a pastor. What do you do if there's a charge of something grossly immoral or illegal like that? Nobody wants. Yeah? If it's reported. Well, let's say you know about a case of your pastor being engaged in such a thing. What do you do with that? You should start there, and let's say you do. You confront me on it, and I say, it's a lie, it never happened.
Well, if you know it's an act, you still have to follow them after you're 18.
If it's not hearsay, and a lot of this stuff is, somebody told me they saw him doing this. Well, that's not good enough. Then you can go back to the one who told you they saw, and you can say, okay, look, you're going to be the one that's going to be dealing with this with me. Don't just tell me and expect me to go fix it. You come along. If you saw it, then we can do something about this. So if you see something illegal firsthand, then, or immoral, then you can go and not necessarily just ask about it. If you know as 100% fact it actually happened, you saw the engagement, saw him going to the prostitute's door. Actually, even that may not necessarily be what you think you saw. See a pastor go and knock on a prostitute's door and go in and talk to her, or go in, shut the door, you assume he's seeing a prostitute. Maybe he's talking to somebody who's genuinely troubled, and that's, pastors get into weird situations like that. But let's say you saw that. Then you would go to him and say, look, pastor, I saw you go into the prostitute. I got to know what's going on. If he says, this is a troubled woman who wanted to talk to me, and I was talking to her, there's really not a lot you can do about that. If he says, yes, you caught me, I've got a problem, I'll work on it, well, then you need to do something about it. Or if a pastor has homosexual activities, and there's guys that show up saying, your pastor gave me AIDS. Believe it or not, there's actually a situation in the district like this. It's not the pastor, it's another employee of the church. The church all of a sudden getting phone calls from some guy saying, the guy you've got working for you gave me AIDS. Well, what has to happen if there's something that's grossly immoral or illegal like that is the pastor, the elders, all of the officers of the church need to be involved in dealing with it. It cannot just be ignored. It has to be addressed. The district president has to be brought in, and there has to be an investigation, one way or another. If there's an accusation of something illegal, there has to be an investigation by the district president. And he will come in and talk to that pastor face to face. He will find out who's making the accusation, talk to them face to face, and they'll check facts. And if the facts bear out that something illegal happened or grossly immoral, then the pastor needs to be removed by the congregation. No matter how well-liked he is, how long he's been there, he has to be removed from the congregation for violating that point on openly sinful lifestyle. But an investigation has to happen to clear the name of the person being accused. Now, this case I said about the phone call to the church and the guy gave me AIDS, an investigation was done of that. And it was found out, even though there is a strong suspicion the person involved may very well be homosexual, it can't be proved, and the guy's ignoring it, so that's where that ends. Then as far as everybody is concerned in the church, they're not homosexual. But the guy making the accusation is being arrested and charged with blackmail. So there are times where people will make accusations because A, they don't like the guy and they want to ruin him, or they want money or something like that. And an investigation hopefully will turn that up, and then the guilty party needs to be dealt with. And the innocent one needs to be treated as if they are innocent.
Well, how about this? There are just supposedly pictures on a phone.
Pictures on a phone. What kind of pictures on a phone? Oh, that one.
In your printout.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, you want to see like
That was, that turns out that the congregation contacted a lawyer before they contacted the district president. And the lawyer told them they had a valid case for sexual harassment with that particular altercation. The pastor was confronted. What did you mean by saying that? Did you say that? Yeah, I did say it. What did you mean by saying that? I don't know. I was just trying to be funny. Well, there are some things you don't joke about. And if he didn't mean it, that was about one of the stupidest things I've ever heard a guy do. You just don't joke about that kind of stuff. I tell you what, a sense of humor gets more guys in trouble than you can believe. Trying to be funny, they just say things that are totally inappropriate and hurt people's feelings. But yeah, I mean, he admitted to saying it and just said, I don't know what I meant. I wasn't, trying to be sexually suggestive. It was just stupid. Well, maybe so, maybe not, but the fact is you put yourself now in a position where you can actually be charged with a sexual harassment lawsuit. So you've done something illegal. The pastor in this particular case wound up voluntarily retiring from the ministry to avoid prosecution. Well, what steps should a congregation take if there are problems with the pastor? What if accusations are genuine? Let's say like a pastor who's rude, a pastor who's unapproachable, a guy who says inappropriate things and is bringing disgrace on the office. What does a congregation do with a pastor who's doing things contrary to his oath of office? You start with Matthew 18. The individuals need to try and address him. And a lot of situations I've been in, people say we have. We've gone and talked to him about it, we've got nowhere. Okay, then the next thing you do, this is where your elders and especially your elders, this is where their position becomes important. Then you bring an elder with you and you sit down again with the pastor, this time face to face with the witness. And you take that next step of Matthew 18. And again, now others are witnesses to the fact that there are things going on here that ought not be. And now, if that fails to resolve it, if it's not just a personality issue between a member of the congregation and a pastor who just don't like each other, which happens in every congregation, if there's something genuinely wrong with the way the pastor is conducting himself, and the member has a legitimate complaint, and the elder discovers that, okay, I believe this is a legitimate complaint, then the next step in the chain of the command is a circuit counselor. Every circuit's got one. Bullhagen is our circuit counselor. So Bullhagen would be contacted. The situation would be laid in front of him. This is what the charges are. This is what we've done to try and resolve it. And the elders would tell the circuit counselor, I honestly believe there may be something to this. We need your help. The circuit counselor would come in. Go through the same basic process again. Accuser, elders, pastor, circuit counselor. If the circuit counselor can't get anywhere and he determines, yeah, there's a real problem going on here, then he will contact the district president. And the district president will come in, do an investigation, and either the pastor will be dealt with or it will come out that the member's charges are unfounded. But there has to be that process. It can't just go from, I'm not happy with the pastor, so I'm calling the district president and saying what a jerk he is. That's the wrong way of dealing with stuff. Or going immediately to the circuit counselor complaining. If you've got a complaint, you've got to go to him personally and try and work it out. And then bring one of the elders with you. Let it be evaluated. Now, these things have to proceed as it would in a court of law. You've got to have proof. It can't be hearsay. It's got to be legitimate. And an investigation will examine those things. Are letters safer or more certain than verbal rumors? All right, so what if there's a chairman of the congregation that's got a stack of letters? Is that somehow more certain than if he said, yeah, I've got a bunch of phone calls from people saying this or that?
Well, if they're signed, I imagine, if they aren't signed, they make a difference.
If they're not, yeah, that's a point. The unsigned ones are pure hearsay and can't be trusted in any way. At least the signed ones have put themselves to their letter. But a letter is an accusatory letter that's signed is pretty much the same as somebody who steps forward and makes an accusation. It's really not necessarily any more certain. It does, however, open up the one who wrote the letter to certain dangers. For instance, this particular case, the letters that were written were of such a nature that it was charging the pastor with somebody claiming to actually have seen him commit adultery. The pastor swore up and down it was an outright lie, and it was designed for nothing else than to destroy his ministry. And against my advice, And against the advice of the district president, he contacted a lawyer himself. And he threatened a lawsuit on this woman for libel. And he probably has a legitimate case. The person who wrote that letter and put their name to it could very well wind up themselves being in trouble for tens of thousands of dollars. And there's a part of me that says that person deserves it. Maybe they'll learn a lesson, and everybody else will learn a lesson too if a lawsuit like that goes through. But then the other part of me that says, yeah, but this is not what pastors do. Pastors who bear the office of Christ get crucified and take it. They don't turn around and sue the person doing the crucifying. So he's wrong in filing suit, but there is a genuine legal case there if he wanted to make one of it. What if complaints are supported by a petition or a vote of no confidence? Here again, what do you do with this? This has, again, been a real case I've had to deal with. Somebody not happy about the pastor, who believes the pastor to be a rotten guy, meeting the cars out in the parking lot as they come in with a petition and having people sign a petition saying, we don't like the pastor anymore. And then comes to the district president and says, I got a petition with 40 names on it of people who think the pastor's a lousy guy and needs to go. What do you do with that? Yeah, you do a little more than that, though, too. What about the guy who wrote the petition and gathered the signatures? Frankly, I think that guy ought to be brought up on charges by the congregation.
I think each one that signs the petition should be.
Yeah, actually, that's the way it went. Each name on that petition was contacted. Each name on the petition was asked, why did you sign this? What evidence do you have to support this? And it turns out, well, I heard from somebody this or that story, that's why I signed it. So you don't have any firsthand experience with the things that you said are going on? Well, no. So virtually all the names were eliminated from the petition on that basis. And then they were asked, okay, now you actually need to apologize to your pastor for doing this.
They backed down pretty quickly, didn't they?
You bet they did. But the guy who put the petition together should have been disciplined by the congregation and should have been made to publicly apologize for doing this, because that's a gross violation of the 8th commandment. You don't go around and try and get a whole bunch of other people on your side. In fact, our Constitution, I think pretty much every church's Constitution, has a thing in it that says that discipline should be exercised on those who stir up dissent in a congregation. And there are members who love doing that, who will go around and talk to everybody they can and try and get as many people on their side, whether it's by a petition or just verbal commitment, and then try and present a case based on all of us are all mad about this, when really it's one guy who's mad that got everybody else mad. And this vote of no confidence, this has come up a couple of times. That means nothing. It doesn't matter if a congregation, if a majority of voters feel they don't have any confidence. They have to be able to make a case. We've had a very real case not that far away from us, with Pastor Rueger. That situation was such that at least the behavior was legally documented. There was an arrest. It was public record. It was verified. There was no questions about it, no accusations. It was out there. And the charges were of such a nature that he needed to be removed from office. By the way, that particular sin of visiting prostitutes, I know of at least 3 other cases of pastors that had similar things happen. It's not uncommon, sad to say. Or how about this? Phone call from an elder of the congregation to the district president. We were just at the synodical convention. I roomed with the pastor. I thought it was a little unusual that we got a room with a hot tub in it, but I didn't say anything about it. I came back in the afternoon from the meetings. Pastor was naked in the hot tub and asked me if I would join him and give him a back rub. And the elder saying, I don't know if there's a sin committed in any of that, but the whole thing weirded me out. I don't know what to do about it. That actually happened. Well, that's the sort of thing that can't just be ignored. It wasn't hearsay, it was firsthand. So the district president got with the elder and with the pastor, and they started talking about it. Well, after it was heard that, yeah, the VP is here and we're talking about that, then a couple of other members said, okay, I've got situations I want to talk about too. Well, it turns out that the pastor was homosexual. And it wasn't just that one guy he had hit on. It was even boys within the community. And the pastor was removed. But, this kind of stuff, you never know what weird stuff is going to happen. A congregation has to know what do you do with it. All right, here's one that doesn't necessarily involve pastors gone awry. You're between classes one day when your good friend Mandy comes up to you and says, do you know what Kayla is saying about you? No, you answer. She's telling everybody that you and Joe, the football player, had sex after the game Friday. Well, that's a lie, you say, Mandy continues. It's not just Kayla either. I heard Joe tell Bob and Frank that he slept with you. Why would Joe lie about something like that, you say? By the end of the day, everybody in school is talking about it. Everybody's siding with Joe and saying that you're lying to cover it up. But you're not lying, Joe is. What's worse is that your dad's a volunteer assistant football coach, and you know that all the football players believe Joe. It's just a matter of time until your dad hears the rumors. What should you do? What? Tell your dad, absolutely. Nip it in the bud. Go to dad right away and say, this is what's going on. It's a lie, but everybody in school believes it. So what should dad do? What? Yeah, actually, not just this happened to a friend of mine. He was the football coach. His daughter was the one being accused of sleeping with this football player. So he didn't just confront Joe. I think rightly so. He confronted Joe and Joe's dad. He asked Joe's dad to come over. And they sat down with him and his daughter in a living room with Joe and his dad on the other side, and they had a face-to-face about this. This is the accusation. And he said that Joe wouldn't look up from the floor. He kept staring at the floor the whole time, but he didn't want to be called a liar, so he kept insisting it was true. So he never would come clean about it. And his daughter, in the meantime, her reputation was utterly destroyed, and the daughter was a good kid. Wasn't the type who did that sort of thing, so it was crushing to her to be accused like that in front of everybody and for people to think that about her. I think in time they may have even wound up in a different school system just to get out from under the accusation because her reputation was destroyed. But things like that happen all the time. It's got to be confronted. It can't be ignored. And if it's a public issue like that that's now involved parents, bring the other parent into it too. All right. Any comments or questions on the 8th commandment?
We had a pastor there that wouldn't even go out and kiss it.
Right?
People's congregation, when
Right.
At the time, I thought that was, a little strange, but I can kind of see where that might be an awful good idea.
Well, if it's a conflicted situation and you're dealing with people that you know have an issue with you, who in the past have bad-mouthed you, having a witness present is a good idea. The problem is, part of a pastor's main duty is to talk to people privately, the sacredness of the confessional, that private conversations are always supposed to remain private, and a pastor has to be accessible privately. That's his calling, to absolve sin and to hear people's heartfelt problems that they need help with. So, depending on the nature of the conversation, you could or could not bring somebody else with you. If it's somebody with a complaint, bring somebody along as a witness.
Well, I just assumed he must have gotten into a problem
Yeah,
sometime previously.
it's very possible, in which case that was a good idea to take somebody along. But the advice pastors are getting these days, especially when it comes to counseling women, single women, is don't. Don't. In fact, district presidents, more than one, has said this. Don't ever be in a room alone with a woman. Now, I've taken the position with, that's not possible. As a pastor, you have to be able to hear everyone the same, and everyone has to be able to have access to you in terms of the confessional. That's your calling. And yes, you put yourself at risk every time you do it. But yet you have to do it. It's your calling. Now, there are things you can do. For instance, if a woman is coming to you with problems, and it's not like somebody who's 80 that nobody is going to be talking about an affair between the woman and the pastor because of the age gap, or a child or something. But if there is any risk at all, then it wouldn't hurt to have just somebody else in the church. Not that they can hear the conversation, but just somebody there who is within earshot of screaming if it should happen. There are weird things that happen. I know of a case of a pastor who was in his study. A woman walked in and said, "My husband doesn't think I'm attractive anymore. Do you?" And she promptly takes her dress off. Well, the guy can't defend himself against that. What do you do? Well, if there's somebody else in the church, at least the church building, and a sudden explosion happens in the pastor's office, and people come running out of there, which I think is exactly what happened in that case. After he told her to get your clothes back on, he bolted out of the office to get away from it as fast as he could. If there's somebody else in the church, at least they can testify to the fact that, yeah, actually the pastor was running down the hall and wasn't trying to molest this poor woman, because she could very easily turn around and say, he ripped my dress off me. There are so many situations like that can just happen to you, bam, before you know what happened. So if it's a counseling situation that you know is coming and it's going to involve being alone in a room with another woman, it's not a bad idea for a pastor to have somebody else within earshot of a disaster if something should happen. You can't record them. You can't videotape things for your protection, and a pastor is at risk. There's just no way to avoid it.
You mean he followed the example of Joseph?
Yeah, basically he did. He ran. And then he immediately went and told his wife what happened. And I think that's important too. Your wife cannot be held in the dark and stuff like that happens. If there's even a hint of anybody having feelings or something, and that's something else. It's not just with pastors, it's a counseling thing. When there's a male counselor, and not just male, between opposite sex counselors, when you're there because you say your husband isn't paying any attention to you anymore, and suddenly here's another man who does pay attention to you and listen to you. It's not at all uncommon for somebody to start developing feelings, well, here's somebody who finally listens to me, even if they're married. Well, if a pastor gets any inclination at all that that's happening in a counseling situation, he needs immediately to put an end to the counseling right then and there. Hook them up with somebody else and talk to your wife. Let her know what's going on. Talk to the elders. Let them know what's going on and why you're not going to counsel this person anymore. But there has to be that willingness to get away from it right away too when the situation, if a situation does arise. And this eighth commandment thing is just so important. Because then when a situation like that does arise, let's say a pastor does cut somebody off from counseling, well, then that person's hurt. And they've just been rejected by their other person, and now they're rejected by a person that they're developing feelings for again, and hell hath no fury, you know. There's nothing that would stop somebody from running around now and making up all kinds of things because we're mad at that person. So congregations with the eighth commandment also need to understand just because there's an accusation doesn't mean it's true. A lot of accusations are not true. One of the ways that an accusation starts smacking of truth is if this is an experience that more than one person has had. Then you know there might be something to it. And if the mental state of the person making the accusation is in question, that should immediately make you question the accusation. But don't believe everything you hear just because somebody says it. And if there is a genuine issue, you got to go through Matthew 18 and talk to people. That's just the only way these things can be resolved biblically. We got to stop there. So let's close. Merciful Father, we do thank you for protecting our names and reputations by having us talk to one another. And we pray that you reconcile us to you, and that when we have conflict, you help us be reconciled to one another, as you have wished. In Jesus' name, amen.